Sanders' remarkable community presence and on-field potential have drawn admiration for many, but for some in the Cleveland Browns organization, his rise has been more of a threat than an asset. While Sanders has continually proved his worth as a player with natural leadership and an ability to connect with fans, certain figures within the team have been working behind the scenes to suppress his involvement. Whether it's through strategic play calling, mysterious injuries, or subtle depth chart shifts.
If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed.
There seems to be a concerted effort to prevent Sanders from fully showcasing his abilities. As the video reveals, this suppression is far from accidental. It's driven by ego, control, and fear, as those in charge of the Browns want to keep their existing hierarchy intact. They know that Sanders could quickly overshadow other quarterbacks, including Dillon Gabriel, who was recently named the starter. The video outlines how this hidden agenda is playing out and how it reflects a larger issue within professional sports organizations, one where talent and leadership are often suppressed to protect egos and prevent the disruption of established power dynamics. Ultimately, this manipulation will be exposed, and Sanders' true potential will break through the barriers imposed by the team. The moment the leak surfaced, the entire Cleveland Browns organization felt a tremor. Quiet manipulation, internal politics, and carefully constructed optics suddenly laid bare. And at the heart of it all, Shedeur Sanders, a quarterback with clear potential, visible leadership, and a rapidly growing fan base, yet for some reason consistently sidelined. According to the latest insider revelations, that some reason may not be about football at all. Behind the scenes, a much more calculated story is emerging. One where Shedeur's skill, charisma, and authenticity aren't being nurtured. They're being smothered. Subtly, systematically, and allegedly by design. The coaching staff, led by Kevin Stefanski, stands accused of orchestrating a slow-burn suppression campaign, an internal effort to keep Sanders off the field, regardless of merit. And the tactics? They're not loud, not obvious, but they're deliberate. Depth chart manipulation, mysterious injuries, suspiciously timed rotation decisions, odd play calling, the kind of moves that add up over time, moves that don't just happen. According to the narrative that's now gaining traction, Stefanski and certain others in leadership are doing everything they can to make sure Sanders stays in the background, not because he isn't ready, but because his presence is a threat, not to the team, but to them. The fear isn't about losing games, it's about losing control. Sanders brings more than football skills to the locker room. He brings leadership, a natural connection with teammates, a following. He's grounded, confident, and he's winning over fans, not through PR spin, but through real community engagement. And that's the problem. For a coaching staff and front office obsessed with hierarchy, with maintaining order, and with controlling the narrative, Sanders represents disruption. Not because he's out of line, but because he's rising on his own terms. His public image is clean, independent, and rooted in real action. He spends time with local youth. He engages with underserved neighborhoods. He shows up. No cameras, no noise, just presence. And that type of connection, that authenticity, doesn't sit well with leadership that prefers to package players into tidy, controllable personas. Sanders doesn't need their image machine. He is the image. And that's where the conflict begins. This isn't just about game plans and QB decisions. It's about ego. The leaks suggest that Stefanski is not just protecting the team structure. He's protecting his own status. Sanders, if given the reins, could easily outshine players handpicked by the system. And that, allegedly, is what's driving the decisions we're seeing. The game day excuses, the phantom back injury, the constant reshuffling that keeps Shedeur just outside the spotlight. And that brings us to Dillon, recently designated as the starter. Gabriel is competent, but his promotion has raised eyebrows, especially when compared to Sanders' skill set and overall impact. The move, according to insiders, was not about performance. It was about politics. Gabriel is seen as a safer choice, more pliable, easier to fit into the current system without rocking the boat. In contrast, Sanders is harder to contain. His leadership comes naturally, not from being granted power, but from earning it. That terrifies those whose authority relies on control rather than credibility. Internally, this tension is starting to show. The locker room isn't oblivious. Players notice who gets rotated out, who gets praised in meetings, who's mysteriously questionable every week. And they see Sanders. They see the way he carries himself, the way he stays focused, the way he doesn't react publicly despite what's happening behind closed doors. That kind of composure, it doesn't go unnoticed. And neither does the jealousy it sparks in others. One name stands out, Anthony, a figure who reportedly can't stand the attention Sanders garners, and who sees him as a challenge to the pecking order. Whether it's ego or insecurity, the tension is real. And it adds another layer to an already messy situation. The leaks suggest that Sanders isn't just facing suppression from above. He's also dealing with envy from peers who feel threatened by his rising influence. Yet through it all, Sanders remains grounded. That's what makes this so maddening. He's not lashing out. He's not staging a rebellion. He's putting his head down, doing the work, and continuing to show up for a team that, by all appearances, is working to keep him in the shadows. He's playing the long game. And while the organization tries to paint him as developing or not quite ready, the fans, and now the media, are starting to see through the smokescreen. Excuse has become symbolic. A physical ailment used more as a narrative shield than a genuine reason. Each time the topic of Sanders' absence is raised, the explanation is vague, non-committal. It's noise, a diversion from the deeper issue. That talent is being suppressed, not because it lacks readiness, but because it's too ready, too visible, too powerful to control. And when an organization starts using health, play calling, and roster politics to bury potential, the question shifts from what are they doing to what are they hiding? Because at this point, it's not a matter of whether Sanders can lead a team. It's a matter of whether the Browns will let him. The entire scenario has started to backfire. With the leaks now public, the credibility of the Browns' leadership is under serious scrutiny. What began as a quiet suppression effort has now exploded into a public relations crisis. And Stefanski? He's at the center of it. No amount of locker room speeches or post-game deflections can mask the growing sense that the team's handling of Sanders isn't just questionable. It's intentional. If that's true, it's a betrayal, not just of Sanders, but of the fans, the locker room, and the spirit of the game itself. Because when you suppress talent for the sake of politics, everyone loses. The team loses. The fans lose. The league loses. And eventually, the truth comes out. It always does. This isn't sustainable. Suppression might work in the short term, but it doesn't last forever. People talk. Players talk. And when a player with real talent and real character gets buried to protect fragile egos, that's not just a scandal, that's a legacy stain. The narrative is shifting. And once that happens, there's no putting it back in the box. Fans are waking up. Media attention is building. And every week Sanders remains benched without a clear explanation. The pressure grows. The organization has built a house of cards, and it's starting to wobble. Eventually, Sanders will get his shot. Maybe not with this staff. Maybe not with this team. But it's coming. And when it does, it's going to be painfully obvious who was right all. What happens next depends on whether the Browns are willing to face the truth or keep doubling down on the cover-up. If you're following this story and wondering why it feels so familiar, that's because it is. This is what happens when talent runs headfirst into politics. When leadership is more interested in control than in cultivating excellence. Don't let this be swept under the rug. Like the video. Share it. Drop a comment if you're seeing the same patterns. And make sure you're subscribed, because this isn't over. Not by a long shot. The longer this plays out, the more it starts to look like a textbook case of sabotage dressed up in strategy. The Cleveland Browns aren't just fumbling a talent. They're actively burying it. And what's worse, they're doing it in plain sight, while hoping fans are too distracted by weekly matchups and post-game pressers to connect the dots. But those dots are connecting fast. Let's strip away the polish. Shedeur Sanders hasn't been given a fair shot, not because he lacks experience, not because he's underperforming, but because giving him a fair shot would expose the very people trying to control the team's image. And Kevin Stefanski is right in the middle of it. The coaching decisions, the press statements, the public-facing depth charts, they all reflect the same underlying motive. Maintain control, limit visibility, protect the hierarchy. This isn't just about benching a player. This is about systemically keeping someone out, someone who could become the face of the franchise if given even half the opportunity. But that's the threat, isn't it? If Sanders starts, if he delivers, if the crowd gets behind him, it won't just be a quarterback taking a field. It'll be a shift in power. And let's be real, some people in that building cannot afford for that shift to happen. The Browns' handling of Sanders reads like a PR masterclass in controlled suppression. The so-called injury reports that pop up right when buzz about his potential starts growing. The sudden change-ups in practice reps. The odd phrasing in interviews, where Stefanski says just enough to sound like he's being transparent, but always holds back from committing to anything solid. It's all part of the same strategy. Say as little as possible, drag it out, hope the noise fades. But the noise isn't fading. It's getting louder. Fans are noticing. Commentators are starting to bring it up on air. Local media has started sniffing around the inconsistencies. Why would a player with this much upside be consistently minimized, especially when the current starter isn't exactly lighting up the stat sheet? Why all the secrecy? Why all the dodging? And now, thanks to the leaks, we know why. It's not about readiness. It's not about injuries. It's about ego, control, fear. The fear that Shedeur Sanders will outperform expectations and throw a wrench into the carefully guarded order. The fear that his rise will expose the fragility of the so-called meritocracy that leadership keeps selling to fans. And the worst part? They're willing to stall an entire season just to keep their control intact. The decision to push Dillon Gabriel to the forefront wasn't random. It's strategic, because Gabriel represents familiarity, predictability, and above all else, safety. He doesn't ruffle feathers. He plays the role he's given. He fits the mold. That's what this leadership group wants. Not the best player, not the most capable leader, the safest option for them. And Sanders? He doesn't fit the mold. He leads without needing permission. He inspires without reading from a script. His community presence, his quiet discipline, his refusal to play the media game. It's not just refreshing. It's threatening to a leadership team that spent years crafting a specific narrative around who gets to lead this franchise and how. Sanders didn't wait for a PR team to tell him to visit local neighborhoods. He did it on his own. He didn't post about it for clout. He didn't bring a camera crew. He showed up. And while that's winning him real fans and real loyalty, it's clearly rubbed some people the wrong way behind closed doors. Because that's not how influence is supposed to work in their world. They want it channeled through press conferences, pre-approved messaging, and sponsorship tie-ins. But Sanders isn't interested in playing that game. He doesn't want to be a brand. He wants to be a... And that, more than any missed rep or minor back strain, is what this is all about. There's no denying it anymore. The Browns are trying to contain Shedeur Sanders because they're scared of what happens if they don't. Scared of what he reveals about the people currently making the decisions. Scared that his rise will show just how far off course the leadership has drifted. And now that the leaks are out, they're in scramble mode, trying to do damage control while pretending nothing's wrong. But there's a limit to how long you can gaslight an entire fan base. Because fans aren't stupid. They know when something's off. And right now, the Browns' decision-making around Sanders doesn't pass the smell test. The excuses are too convenient. The timing is too perfect. And the total lack of transparency? It's only confirming suspicions. Every week Sanders stays benched, the questions grow louder. Every time Gabriel takes the field and delivers an average performance, the comparison sharpens. Every time Sanders is left off media day, while teammates with less impact get trotted out for soundbites, it just becomes more. They're not just stalling his career. They're managing optics. But that won't last. Because what's coming is a reckoning. You can suppress the truth for a while. You can bury a player behind layers of PR and injury reports. But talent doesn't stay hidden forever. Leadership that's built on ego instead of trust eventually collapses. And when it does, it won't be Sanders who pays the price. It'll be the ones who tried to stand in his way. That's the real panic setting in behind the scenes right now. Not just the public pressure, not just the leaks, but the dawning realization that the narrative is slipping out of their hands. The more they try to control Sanders, the more obvious their fear becomes. Because if they truly believed in the decisions they were making, they wouldn't have to spin them. They wouldn't need back injury excuses or mid-season reshuffles. They'd let the performance speak for itself. But they won't. Because they know. They know what's coming. Eventually, the suppression fails. Sanders gets his shot. And when he does, when he proves what most of us already suspect, the spotlight won't be on him. It'll be on the organization, on the months of excuses, on the calculated dodges, on the people who chose politics over performance. This isn't just a quarterback controversy. This is a full-blown institutional indictment. And as more insiders come forward, as more fans connect the dots, and as Sanders continues to lead off the field the way they won't let him on it, that indictment will only get louder. So here's what it comes down to. Either the Browns change course and do the right thing, or they dig in and let this narrative explode. Either way, the truth is coming. And when it does, it won't just change the trajectory of Sanders' career. It'll redefine how people see the leadership of this entire franchise. At this point, the story isn't just about what's happening to Shedeur Sanders. It's about what it says about the Cleveland Browns. Because when a franchise has to twist itself into knots to suppress a player's rise, that's not just insecurity. That's dysfunction. You're watching a situation unfold where one of the most promising young quarterbacks in the league has effectively been benched, not for poor performance, but for being too good to ignore. The silence from leadership? Deafening. The excuses? Tired. And the result? A fan base that's growing more restless by the day. Everyone can see it now. The game within the game. The part they don't talk about on SportsCenter. Where talent doesn't just have to prove itself on the field. It has to fight through egos, image management, and political landmines just to get a chance. Shedeur Sanders isn't in a quarterback competition. He's in a control war. And Kevin Stefanski? He's looking less like a head coach and more like a man cornered by his own narrative. The coaching decisions aren't just suspicious, they're becoming indefensible. The phantom back injury has become the punchline of the season. One day he's week to week, the next he's miraculously practicing in full pads, then back to being questionable again. It's like the injury report is being written by someone spinning a roulette wheel in the front office. And the thing is, if Sanders really wasn't ready, if he truly needed more time, you'd see that story supported by film, by fair competition, by transparency. But none of that exists. What you get instead is obfuscation. A whole lot of "we're evaluating," and he's coming along with nothing concrete to back it up. That's not development. That's deflection. Meanwhile, Dylan Gabriel, who was essentially fast-tracked into the starting job, continues to deliver exactly what you'd expect. Predictability. No highs, no breakthrough moments, just safe throws and system plays. And for a franchise allegedly trying to win, that should raise red flags. But instead, leadership doubles down, because predictable in their eyes is preferable to powerful. And that's what Sanders is, powerful. Not just in talent, but in presence, in leadership, in the way he interacts with the world around him. There's a gravity to him that you don't teach. His teammates see it, the fans feel it, and the people upstairs? They fear it. Because when someone like Shedeur Sanders gains momentum, you can't script it, you can't spin it, and you definitely can't control it. That's why they're panicking. The leaks that exposed all this weren't just inconvenient. They were a direct threat to the control that's held the Browns' internal power structure together. Now that the truth is surfacing, that Sanders was never being developed, just delayed, leadership is in damage control mode. But here's the thing about damage control. It only works if the damage isn't still happening. And right now, the suppression continues. Each game that passes without Sanders getting reps is another chapter in this slow-burning scandal. And every time a coach steps up to the podium with another recycled line about trusting the process, they're just pouring gas on the fire. Because the process doesn't make sense anymore. How do you preach team-first culture while actively undercutting one of your most respected locker room leaders? How do you sell the idea of competition while clearly favoring the safe choice? And how do you expect fans to believe in a future that's being held hostage by outdated egos and fear-based leadership? You don't. And they're not. Fans are watching this play out in real time, and they're not staying quiet. Social media has exploded with questions the organization refuses to answer. Local sports radio is starting to shift tone, turning skepticism into direct criticism. And more insiders are quietly confirming what many suspected. Sanders was never being prepped for a breakout. He was being stalled. Because if Sanders had the chance to lead, if he succeeded, it would force a reckoning, a reshuffling of power, a re-examination of the decisions that have defined this organization. And Stefanski? He's not ready for that fallout. So instead of risking the rise, they're engineering a stall. But this won't end the way they think it will. Sanders doesn't need a team to hand him the spotlight. He's already earned it. The fans know it. The community knows it. Even the locker room knows it. And at some point, the pressure from the outside will collide with the fractures on the inside. When that happens, the Browns won't be able to contain it anymore. They'll have to answer for the rotation games, the selective injuries, the phantom evaluations. They'll have to explain why they wasted a season protecting the image of leadership instead of developing a player who could have redefined the franchise. And when that day comes, Sanders won't need to say a word. His talent, his resilience, his integrity, that will speak louder than any press release ever could. So keep watching. Because this isn't just about one player's journey. It's about exposing how fragile some institutions become when real leadership walks through the door. It's about how far people will go to maintain power, even if it means stalling greatness. And it's about how eventually truth wins. Hit like if you're done buying the excuses. Share this if you see through the noise. Drop a comment if you're with the fans who want accountability. And make sure you're subscribed, because this isn't just a story anymore. It's a reckoning, and it's only getting louder.